This has been a crazy year for books. Hello, my name is Andrew Givler, and I'm an author, but I also love to read. And today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my 5 favorite books that I've read so far this year. Like I said, going back and putting this list together, I realized one, that I have no concept of time. I put books on the list that I read last year. Nope, I have no idea when it is, or who I am. If you have a concept of that, congratulations. Number 2, looking at this list, this is a star-studded list, and we're only 3/4 of the way through the year. Hopefully there'll be some books on this list you haven't read yet. You can go check them out. As always, if you're interested in any of the books that I read here, they'll be linked in the description below. If you use my link, I get a nice little kickback and help pay for the lights that shine in my face. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button if you want more content like this, or if you aren't new to the channel, hit the like button because that helps, okay? So do it. So like I said, we're covering the top 5 books that I've read so far this year, and you know, I had a hard time with this list, but the hardest one was picking number 5, because honestly, like I said, it's been such a killer year for books. There are a whole bunch of books I really wanted to put in here, but I really had to think about like the one that I got the most excited about, the one I couldn't put down, the one I just really powered through. Now, number 5 was actually a recommendation I got from another booktuber, and I checked it out on his recommendation. It's called Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. Gunmetal Gods describes itself as being a dark epic fantasy, and I think I very much agree with that. You've got multiple cultures, multiple religions, but everything is about war, okay? They say it's just an absolute brawl between different civilizations, different religions. It's pretty interesting the way that you jump between the different characters and see how what they're doing makes sense to them, but not to the other person. This fantasy is also one of the ones that I really enjoy, which is like fantasy hovering on the edge of technological revolution. So you've got not just bows and arrows, but like the beginning of gunpowder and guns and things like that, and like that power struggle that emerges when cannons start to show up and things like that. Some of my favorite books that have like the kind of like dark epic fantasy vibe capture that moment because of the devastating when the enemies show up with cannons and nobody knows what's happening, and then their walls are falling down and they were never ready for this. Yeah, that kind of thing. The book describes itself as being Game of Thrones meets Arabian Nights, and I think that is also a really, really cool aspect of it. It's written with a lot of Middle Eastern influence, which is really interesting. You get to see some cultures and ideas represented in the kind of inspiration for the world that we don't necessarily see in Western fantasy all the time. So it's really cool to like dive into this world and experience something different. I really enjoyed it. The 2 main characters that we spend most of our time between are like the head of the Paladins, like from the Empire. His name's Micah, and then his counterpart, who used to be a legendary Janissary and is sort of being brought back into service. His name is Keva, and they square off against each other, but they also like begin to understand each other and the forces that are pushing each other. And I think they're really, really cool counterpoint to each other. Like they sort of illuminate each other's differences and weaknesses and strengths. I don't want to give anything away. There's no spoilers, but I really enjoy the way it goes, and the magic that's in the world that begins to creep in. Very fun. It's one of those ones where you don't necessarily know about all the magic in the beginning, and at the end, you know way more than you thought you knew, but it was what it wasn't, what it isn't. You know what I mean? If you don't, just read the book. Trust me. The second book is out. I have not read it yet. It is high on my to-do list. I also realized looking through this list that while it's been a crazy year, I haven't been reading as much. Probably because I've been writing, but you know, that is what it is. I need to read more. Book 2 is called Conqueror's Blood, and it is on my list, and this should be on yours. So link in the description below if you want to check it out. Highly recommend it. Now, number 4 was, of course, Soul Fraud. No, I'm kidding. It's not my own book. My own book would never appear on this list. Also, my book would not be in the top 5. Moving on to number 4, and again, some of you are going to freak out that I put this at number 4, and I'm sorry, but actually, I'm not sorry. I really like this book. There's no apology necessary. For me, number 4 is Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. Now, if you haven't been reading it, think basically the TV show Vikings and dark epic fantasy smashed together, layered in between 2 delicious pieces of Oreo cookie. That's about where you're going. Basically, the premise of the world, this is the second book. So start with Shadow of the Gods. So I said this is Hunger of the Gods is the one that I've read that I'm putting at number 4. It's the sequel. It came out this year. Hunger of the Gods sets the stage. Basically, you're following a couple different groups of Vikings, and they live in a world where their gods are dead. God is dead. Like the bones of their gods are littering the ground. They are post-deity society. But if you've read a fantasy novel before, that's kind of like saying, like, if you've read like an urban fantasy novel and it's like, the main character has no power and he's very weak and he will never amount to anything. Things are starting to wake up. Legends are coming to life, things like that. And there's a whole lot of intrigue, and the couple different groups that are moving, the war bands and the other, they're all kind of affecting each other, but they don't know it. And so kind of getting to see all the different things and how like these big strings are moving across the continent. Super cool. The characters themselves are great. The writing is really precise. John Gwynn's an excellent writer. He's another series called The Faithful and the Fallen. It's got like Malice and Ruin and Valor and a couple other names that are all things you want or don't want to have happen to you. He's a legend, okay? So this book, you've probably read this if you really are deep in the fantasy space, especially if you're in the BookTube space. Everybody's been talking about this one. I highly recommend it. I loved it. I can't wait for the third one because it leaves off at a a chef's kiss kind of moment. So I highly recommend it, especially because I'm a huge sucker for vampire. Why did I say vampires? Vikings. Hello? There are no vampires. That was not a spoiler. Vikings. I'm a sucker for Vikings because, I don't know, there's something about like the Viking shield wall and the Viking ships, the longboats and the stuff. I just think it's so cool. I really liked the show Vikings. That might be why. As the tagline for the book says, the best sagas are written in blood. This one's definitely written in blood. You should go check it out. It will be linked in the description below. Now, number 3 and number 2, I think are gonna catch people off guard because I've never seen anybody else talk about these. Actually, I think I've seen like one person talk about number 2. I've never seen anybody talk about number 3. This was a random Amazon recommendation to me, but it just hit at that moment where it was the vibe that I was looking for, like the type of world, but also it's really good. My number 3 book that I read this year is The Bone Ships by R.J. Baker. Now, if you haven't heard about it, it's a trilogy. I've read all 3 of them this year. I'm kind of counting them as one, but if I had to pick a favorite, it would be the third one. But you get the point, right? The premise of The Bone Ship is basically like these 2 island nations, right? All these islands scattered around. Kind of think like the Caribbean. I think Pirates of the Caribbean vibe a little bit, but way darker. You've got these 2 island nations and they are constantly warring against each other. They have super strict culture, the way that they treat people kind of like the Spartans, where like people who aren't burned perfect are discarded and they can only live on the land. And to be like the elite member society, you can join like the Navy and sail. But their ships are made out of bones. They're bone ships. They're made out of basically like sea drakes. Like they're made out of like, you know, the breastbone and the chest bone and like the wings of like sea dragons, basically. And they've hunted those dragons to extinction. So it's not possible for any navy to make more ships. They have all the ships they will ever have. Well, they can make wood ships. The wood ships just like fall apart. Like the drake bones are like lightweight, but also strong. They can just like smash right through. And just like, so basically, these 2 nations are locked in this battle, but they're like, that's it. This is the end of the ships. Like, we have to fight with just this. The Tide Child follows the crew of a ship called the Tide Child, which is a black ship. And a black ship is like a white bone ship that's been painted black, and everybody who served on it is sentenced to death. So they're like, instead of death row, they put you on a boat and make you fight till you die. Not sure how effective they expect them to be, but that's beside the point. And without giving anything away, the premise of the first book is the first sea dragon in centuries has been spotted. And the Tide Child has been sent to do something about it. And this crew has to figure out who they are, what they want to be, even if they are, you know, condemned to death. Do they want to stand for something more? There's a whole bunch of intrigue, corruption, plots to uncover. So if you like all that kind of stuff, this book was a complete surprise. Like I said, no one else had ever told me about it. It was an Amazon recommendation. I liked the sound of it. One of the things that I really appreciated about how this was written, by the way, is I'm not a huge sea guy, right? Like I've read Master and Commander, I've read some other ones. I don't know my port from my starboard. I don't know how to do the rigging or the jib, or I know how to set an anchor. That one makes sense. But like if the nautical speech gets too nautical in the series, my eyes gloss over and my brain falls out, right? Like I just don't know what's going on. And this book does a really good job of like just putting in a little bit so you feel the sea vibe without being like, and then at 4 p.m. they tacked 4 degrees south, setting themselves perpendicular to the mariner's sea chest. Right, you don't need to know how ships work to enjoy the sea combat, and that was a really great choice, I think, by the author. Blew me away, loved it, highly recommend it. The 3rd book made me cry. I don't really cry at books, so read the 3rd book, read them all. Link will be in the description. Number 2, like I said, is another one that flies under the radar as far as I'm concerned. I was super pumped. This series has actually been a huge favorite of mine for a long time. The final book came out this year. It's called The Priest of Crowns. Now, the original book is called The Priest of Bones, and it is the War for the Rose Throne quadrilogy. There are 4 of them. I discovered the first one a while back on some random recommendation. I read it. It was the only one out, and I've been devouring the rest of them as they go. The book's by Peter McLean, and the basic premise is this very war-torn, poverty-stricken country. All these soldiers come back from what is like the equivalent of a world war. They've been like in the trenches, gone for years. They're all destitute, burnt out, probably PTSD riddled, and they come home and they have no options. They have nothing. So the company decides to stick together and form a mafia. And so they do. And they begin as a small mafia taking over a part of town, but they are not just a mafia, they're soldiers, right? So they're very efficient, they're very dangerous, they're very deadly. They call themselves the Pious Men. And bit by bit, they begin to take over part of the city. And the writing's super cool. If you like Peaky Blinders, you'll probably notice some similarities, like that same sort of like post-World War I vibe, you know, kind of low technology. There's very little magic in this, but there is some, and it works really well. So I think this is technically classified as like low fantasy. It is not set in our world, so it could be high fantasy. I don't know, man. It's low fantasy. That's what I'm going to say. But it's excellent. And the characters are fantastic. You ride along in the head of the pious man, who is a priest of bones. He was a priest during the war, and now he is running an illegal organization. And bit by bit, they grow and build their power, and it's so much fun to go along with the ride. And I also think that it's really, really accurately written, of like, people doing bad things have bad things happening to them and are not good people necessarily. Like, it's not a story about heroes, but it is a story about what happens to people. And if you enjoy those kinds of things, it's something you should follow. The characters are great. The action is incredible. The writing is amazing. Peter McClellan has been like quietly one of my favorite authors for a while. I'm so pumped about this series. I will read anything else that he writes. I highly recommend it. Again, the first book will be linked in the description below if you want to check it out. So those are my first 4 books of the year, right? From 5 to 4. I can't do math. This is why I write books for a living. I cannot do math. From 5 to 2. I almost said to 1. I'm helpless. So All That Leaves is number 1. And I feel like I've hit you guys with some curveballs so far, right? Gunmetal Gods is really popular on Amazon, but I don't think a lot of people have talked about it. Hunger of the Gods is very popular, and I think a lot of people expected it to be maybe higher. The Bone Ships and Priest of Crowns are both not super popular as well, so I hope you guys have found some new things to check out, because number 1 is very popular, and you should have heard of it. If you haven't, I'm happy to expose you to something great. But my favorite book that I've read so far this year was Dread God by Will White. Now, if you aren't familiar with the Cradle series, it's one of the most like runaway indie self-published series on Amazon. Dread God is actually book 11 of the series. You need to start at the beginning, which is book 1 is Unsold. I will link it again in the description below. It is a fantastic series. It exists in a genre that's kind of a new emerging genre. Well, maybe it's not that new, but it's getting more popular, called progression fantasy. This is the basic idea that the magic system of the world is built around accumulating power. So you start off weak and you level up. You become stronger as you go. Not necessarily like that you're in a video game, but just that you get stronger. And the Cradle series follows a couple of friends who start out incredibly weak, all with their own problems, and as they overcome, they unlock secrets of magic. They grow in their power. The magic system is awesome. The writing is great. One of the things I really like about the way Will White writes this, oh, she sells seashells down by the seashore. Boom! I nailed that. Okay. Each book kind of feels like an episode of the thing, as it should, but it's not wasted space or bloated. Like his writing is really precise. He's not afraid to just be like, here's the thing, here's the challenge. They're gonna throw down, and this is how they're gonna overcome it. And I think the momentum and pacing of it is incredible. It's such a satisfying read. I need to read the whole series again. I absolutely love it. It crushes it. Everybody loves it. Dread God was sort of the curve of an arc, right? It's the part where a lot of things that have been built up to, it's like the growing into the shoes that he has to fill kind of thing, right? And it hit the mark for me. I really enjoyed it. I thought the villain was awesome. I thought the power was awesome. I thought the way that everything progressed was awesome. I had no quibbles about it. It was entertaining me from the beginning to the end, and even in the middle too. So for that, I gotta give it number 1 for the year. This could change. We still have 3 months left in the year, but these are my top 5 this year. Now, if I gave you guys something that you guys haven't heard before, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button. I also would love to hear your guys' top 5 in the comments down below, okay? If you're not immediately running off to go buy all these books because you haven't read any of them and I just saved your life, you're welcome. So I look forward to discussing more books with you guys in the future. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.